Hello and welcome to our Game Changers Live keynote with Mark Enzer. I'll just give Mark a quick introduction before we dive into his presentation. Mark Enzer is Mark McDonald's Chief Technical Officer and is head of the National Digital Twin Programme. Mark, I'll not embarrass you any further with any more introduction, but we're really looking forward to hearing what you've got to say. So if you could share your screen and take us into your presentation, that'd be great. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to drop them into the Q&A box, and we'll pick them up following Mark's presentation. Thanks a lot.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. It's really good to be here and to actually have a little bit more time to run through this stuff to do with the National Digital Twin, because very often what I find is that I've got 15 minutes and I try to get in as many words as I possibly can in the 15 minutes. So it's really good to have a little bit longer now, to take it a bit slower and dig into it in a bit more detail. And what I'm really hoping is that it can turn into a bit of a conversation. I'm really looking forward to having that conversation with Oliver, but also more broadly, because I'm imagining that some of the stuff I'll say will spur some questions, and it will be just great to discuss them. So, National Digital Twin as a game changer. I'm convinced it is, and I'd like to try and convince you too. So the way that I thought I'd do it is first by considering what is the game and what is the prize. Then kind of dig into how we go about changing the game. And then at the end, I thought I'd give you a bit of an update as to what we're actually doing about it and how that's going. But items 1 and 2 are kind of the theory, the context bit of it. So do bear with that, because we will get into what we're actually doing. So what is the game? What are we actually about? I think the game that we're talking about changing here is to do with the broader built environment and applying Industry 4.0 thinking to our infrastructure and built environment. And that is an absolute game changer. You know, our Victorian forebears did some amazing work for us in the second industrial revolution, kind of kicking off the infrastructure that we know and love. But that is largely physical. And I think that what we're doing just now is almost a rerun of that, but doing it in the digital world. It's almost like we're building new digital worlds that mirror our physical world, that benefit our physical world and benefit the people in it. And I think that's probably well, for me anyway, the top point of what this is all about. It's all about improving outcomes for people and society. That's what gives it purpose. That's what it's all about. But it's using some pretty clever stuff in the digital world to derive those benefits for people and society. So I won't run laboriously through what those kind of benefits might be of a national digital twin, but I think they're very wide-ranging to society around improving better outcomes for us, particularly through having higher performing infrastructure and the services it provides. I think massive benefits to the economy in terms of national productivity that derive from using our infrastructure better. I think huge benefits to business too. I can imagine that actually what we're doing here is creating a whole new market, a whole new game, you could call it, for those who are buying digital twins, connecting digital twins, selling products and services in that market. And I don't think it's going too far to say that this is almost like we're on the edge of what our Victorian forebears did before us for physical. We can do the same again, but for digital. And then benefits to the environment, because I see that an awful lot of the major challenges that we face just now, so thinking about net zero, resilience, circular economy, those are quintessentially systemic challenges, and they demand a systems-based solution. We can't solve them in silos, and maybe up till now we've kind of operated our built environment in silos, or not seen it as a system. But I think that when we do recognize it as a system and have competent tools to be able to run it that way, like connected digital twins, then we can drive those kind of benefits, which incidentally are also benefits to people. So I think it's all about outcomes. It's all about people. That's a key thing to say. And I think that the National Digital Twin Programme is a socio-technical change programme. This is not just about clever techie solutions. And I think we'll probably keep coming back to that theme as we run through. So what kicked it all off was a fantastic report that came out of the National Infrastructure Commission 3 years ago. And what that recommended was that we should move towards having this national digital twin, that to enable it, we should put in place an information management framework. And I will describe that in quite a bit more detail in a bit. And then to enable that, we should bring people together from across government and academia and industry in what is really quite a big exercise to come up with that information management framework to enable the national digital twin. So those were kind of high-level, important recommendations in what I think was a really visionary report. So the role of CDBB in that, this is the Centre for Digital Britain, is firstly to deliver that information management framework. That's our job. But it's not our job to deliver the national digital twin. It's not our job to build it. It's our job to enable it. And what we see really is that the building of the national digital twin is for everyone else. It's for all of us. To be developing digital twins and everything that goes with it, the state of the art, the connections between them, etc., etc. That's for the industry to do, but the industry needs to be enabled. So our job is to deliver. It's the industry's job to actually go and do the building, which is good news because that means a whole new market. And I think that when we're talking about changing the game, a large part of that is to do with how we enable that market to be a vibrant market with low barriers to entry that enable all sorts of players to come and play and do their stuff and innovate and do all sorts of wonderful things so that we end up with the best kind of national digital twin. So in driving this, I guess it's important to have a vision and understand where we're going. And I think I'm on the verge of laboring the point too much now, but this outcomes focus, I think, is really important. It does have to be all about driving improved outcomes for people and society. And a key part of that has to be the impact on the natural environment. So I think we're talking regeneration here. We're not just talking about some kind of passive interface with the natural environment. So it's outcomes focused. But also systems-based. And I think a systems-based view is key to unlocking a lot of the value. Now, we put out a paper earlier this year called Flourishing Systems. I'd recommend it. Google it, have a look at what it says. But the next few slides are really borrowing quite heavily from that to illustrate really what we mean by that, but also why it matters, why it's important. So the first thing, I guess, is for us to see the built environment as a system of systems. It's the most amazing thing that we have built within which we live. We've built it for our own good. I think the built environment doesn't always act like it's for our own good. And I guess if all we do is just concrete over the nearest park, then it doesn't feel like that. But really important to see that this is something that we have built for our benefit, and it needs to have that benefit at its heart. So I think that people should be the kind of the beginning and the end of all of this. But anyway, what that thing is that we've built, this system of systems, consists of economic infrastructure. So that's our transport networks, energy networks, water networks, waste treatment networks, telecoms networks. That's our economic infrastructure. And each of those are complex, interconnected systems. And then our social infrastructure, so our hospitals, prisons and schools, commercial, industrial buildings, residential buildings, all of which absolutely rely on the economic infrastructure to make them work. So again, complex and interconnected. And then the natural environment, which itself is a complex interconnected system, and our built environment interfaces with that. So when you add all of it up together, you get our built environment, this most amazing thing that we've built to live inside. But we don't always see it that way. And if we don't see it that way, then it's very difficult to manage it that way. And if we don't manage it that way, then we can't get the best out of it. So I think it's really important for us to see this as a system of systems. But maybe even more important than that is to see it as a system of services, because people live in this thing. And as I say, it's all about people. And what people really do, I think, the way they get the benefit is from either direct or implied services from the infrastructure. And that's how we get to the outcomes, the ones we desire: social, economic, and environmental outcomes. And I think that this connection between the kind of the rather mechanical system, which sounds like it's just about technical, and the people, is to do with the services. So if we are really focused on people, and we make the connection between the kind of the hard concrete and steel of infrastructure and the soft squidginess of people, then it's the services that make that connection and deliver the outcomes. So a system of services too. And if we've got this systems-based view of the built environment, then it reveals some interesting things, because in the UK, we've got something like 99.5% of the infrastructure and built environment that we need already. And then each year, we add 0.5% to it. And so we put quite a lot of thinking into the new stuff, that 0.5%. And that's important because that 0.5% is our construction industry, and the construction industry is worth something like 9% of our GDP. So that is huge. That really does matter. It might on this diagram look like a small number, but it really, really matters. But also the 99.5% really matters. So the argument here is that we should take a whole view, a holistic view of the whole thing, and basically come up with solutions which are for the 100%, not just for the 0.5, not just for the 99.5, but for the 100. And if we're doing that, then I think we can see some really interesting processes that can be improved throughout that life cycle. So for me, the most important processes are to do with the use. And this is me making my point again about the services, because the whole point of it is for people to use it. So that should be right at the center of the processes that we improve. But in order to make the built environment and the infrastructure available for use, then what we have to do is operate and maintain it, obviously. And those processes, the operation and maintenance, generally happen at a system level, not at an asset level. And so we can see those processes basically carrying on forever. For as long as we want our built environment to work for us, we need to operate and maintain it. It doesn't have a life cycle, it goes on forever. But then every now and again, we need some new stuff. And like I said, that's really important. And so what we then do is kick off some planning and design and building, and then we integrate it back into the system. So I think it's really important to see our projects in terms of being interventions on the wider system. So instead of seeing our infrastructure as a series of construction projects, we can see it as a system, and then our projects are interventions on the system. This is the system thinking. And every single one of those processes on this diagram can be improved. They can be improved by making better decisions faster and cheaper. And how do you make better decisions faster and cheaper? Well, it's got something to do with managing information better. And that's kind of at the heart of what the National Digital Twin is about. And I'll come back to this. But basically, what we're looking at is using information better to make better decisions, to drive better interventions, and lead to better outcomes in every single one of these processes. And if we're doing that, then that can drive us towards a sustainable system, because it makes no sense for us to be living inside something that we say has to last forever, or at least last as long as we want society to last. It makes no sense to have something that's got to last forever if it's not sustainable. That doesn't compute. It has to be sustainable. So I think if we're really getting our heads around this systems thinking, then we need to be driving towards sustainable system. And then I'd kind of reiterate the point that we need systems-based solutions for things like net zero and resilience and circular economy. And then eventually I get to the bit which is more close to digital twins, is seeing it as a cyber-physical system. Now, I don't think that we can even begin to imagine a cyber-physical system if we haven't got our heads around the system. So this systems thinking is an absolute must for us to unlock the value of Industry 4.0 applied to our built environment. But doing that, I think, is not so complicated. Really, all it's saying is that digital assets have real value, just the same as physical assets do. And when we bring our digital world and our physical world together, then we unlock more value for ourselves, principally by taking data from the real world, doing something clever with it to drive better decisions and better interventions back in the physical world. But this is kind of this is our job. This is what we've got to do if we want to take over the digital worlds. We've got to see them, and then we've got to manage them. So how do we do that? I think a key part of it is seeing this information value chain. I've kind of touched on it already, but what this is recognizing is that you can get data from all sorts of different sources. Those are the arrows at the bottom of the diagram, which could be from sensors, or it could be from the Twitter fire hose, or it could be from satellite data, or from wherever. It's just data, but generally that data isn't of a great quality, and very often what we've got to do is some cleansing of it, maybe some structuring of it, etc., to make the data fit for use. So if we do all that lovely data management, which is hard work, incidentally, but if we do that, all we're left with is data that's fit for use. It's still just data. We have to do something with it to generate more value as we go up this triangle. So we make sense of it, we analyze it, we apply models to it and simulation, etc., so that we generate insights. And those insights are of greater value than the data on which they were based. And then we can use those insights to drive better decisions. And if we drive better decisions, then we can have better interventions. And if we have better interventions, then we can drive better outcomes. So what this does is show us the connection between data and outcomes. And we said at the beginning, I hope we all agree, that outcomes are what it's all about. That's what matters. And now we have a connection between outcomes and data. But right in the middle, the thing that unlocks the value is making better decisions. And if we can make better decisions faster and cheaper, then we're driving better outcomes. So that's at the heart of it. I apologize if it sounds a little bit just theoretical and esoteric, but I think it's good to be able to put our finger on the thing that actually matters. And if we buy this, I hope that you're buying this, then we can see the information value chain in digital twins. So in many ways, a digital twin is just an embodiment of that information value chain. So we're taking data from the real world, we're doing something clever with it to generate insights, we're using those insights to drive decisions, and the decisions drive the interventions back in the real world. Now, clearly, this kind of diagram is showing something physical. It's like a bit of rolling stock. But we can also have digital twins of processes. So you can have digital twins of assets, processes, and systems. The same argument applies, though. And also, I'd say you don't have to have a live data connection. What matters is that it's data at a refresh rate that is appropriate for the purpose to which it's put. And this is a point that we keep coming back to on digital twins, that they really need to be driven by purpose. What is the purpose of the digital twin? That will then determine pretty much everything else, including the data refresh rate. And then inside the digital twin, we can see that there's something really important about the data handling, which can come from many different sources. there's something very important about the model, the core code which is being used to generate the insights. And then I think there's something really important as well about visualization and helping humans to have a window into the digital twin so they can see what's going on to help make the decisions. And then there's a whole question about where does the human fit in this loop? It's a human in the loop type question. Is it just in making the decisions or is it part of making interventions? So lots of kind of questions and variables in what constitutes a digital twin. But I'm hoping that I've said enough here to indicate what they're basically about. And if we can imagine a digital twin for one particular bit of our infrastructure, then we can also imagine digital twins for other bits. So now we've got a digital twin of the train, digital twin of the track, digital twin of the signaling. And doesn't it make sense to kind of connect them? Because there's going to be some data from the track that's relevant to the train and vice versa. And so now we're starting to think of how we connect the digital twins, and notice that what connects them is data. It's secure, resilient data sharing. That's what connects twins. But if we can do that, then we have something that's even more valuable than just an individual digital twin, which incidentally is super valuable anyway. And we can take that outer layer and look at connected digital twins across transport sectors, so between road, rail, and air, for example. Or we can zoom out again and make the same argument across whole sectors. So connections between road between transport and energy and water. Now, I think that this is really interesting because if we take that systems view that I was espousing earlier on, then we can see that actually in the physical world, all of these sectors are connected. Energy is basically connected into all other sectors. And particularly as we move towards having electric vehicles and charging points all over the place, you kind of ask, is an electric vehicle part of the transport sector or part of the energy sector? Truth is, it's both, because they're all connected. And therefore, this kind of secure, resilient data sharing becomes absolutely essential and key to having tools that can help us manage the systems. So that's starting to describe an ecosystem of connected digital twins. And eventually, I've got to the point of saying what the National Digital Twin is. So it's not one massive model of everything. It's envisaged to be an ecosystem of connected digital twins. And we're not saying that it's going to be connecting every digital twin with every other digital twin. And we're not saying that everything that moves is going to have a digital twin. What we are saying is that it should be driven by purpose. So where it makes sense to have a digital twin because it can help drive the better decisions, then you should have one. And where it makes sense to connect digital twins, then you should make the connections. And so what we're talking about is this ecosystem which is driven by purpose, and an ecosystem that would grow one purpose at a time. And so you can kind of see it growing almost organically, one purpose at a time, which in many ways does mimic how the physical infrastructure grew. Nobody planned infrastructure in its entirety. What they did was just plan little bits of it and then add them together. And in many ways, that's how the National Digital Twin is envisaged to grow. So that's all very nice, but it could be chaos, couldn't it? If every single one of these data connections was written in a bespoke way, which you can always do. You can always write an API and share data from one point to another. That's easy. But if every single one were different, what we would build is a network with massive friction in the system. So what we need really to make all of this work is a way of reducing that friction of data sharing and having some kind of standards that make it easier to share data in consistent ways. And so if we now think about coordinating this slightly, connecting things together, but having enough coordination to minimize the friction in data sharing, now we're talking about the National Digital Twin. And really, that the heart of the National Digital Twin is enabling that secure, resilient data sharing. So when I first say National Digital Twin, it sounds like a huge, difficult thing to do, but it kind of can boil down to somehow or other enabling this secure, resilient data sharing across organizational and sector boundaries. And what we think that's all about is the quality and consistency of data. Now, if I take a cross-section through this, which in some ways you can see as a pipe. It's almost like a pipe. So let's take a cross section through it and then see what that looks like. And don't be scared off by this next slide. I won't stay on it for very long, but it's just showing you what it is. So if we're taking a cross section through that pipe, what it looks like is within the pipe some clean data. And how do we make sure it's clean? Well, we need some rules. We need to have some protocols to make sure that only authorized people can put the data in and take the data out. And so a lot of what is needed here are some standard protocols and some standards related to how we understand the data that is being put into it. And I think that if we take another view, so I've done the cross section, and I think that this view is maybe a little bit more accessible. So now I'm imagining almost like a plan view of it. What I think we are describing is a data infrastructure. We're enabling that pipe work to connect up different digital twins in different sectors, but also in different parts of the country. So this really is a data infrastructure, and we're very familiar with a physical infrastructure of transport networks, energy networks, water networks. But what we're kind of talking about now is a data infrastructure, which I would put to you is as big a game changer, or potentially, if we can get it right, as big a game changer as any one of those other physical networks and physical infrastructures that I just ran through. And this has to be outcome focused and systems based. I think another thing that it has to be is good. So I already introduced the document that kicked all of this off, called Data for the Public Good. And I think the clue is in the name there. Technology isn't always used for good. We know that. And in some ways, technology itself is kind of amoral, and it depends on the values of the people who use it. So it's not a default that if we did all of this, it would automatically be good. And therefore, I think it's really important that we guide this journey with very clear values that we as an industry are very happy to sign up to, that shared values that make sure that this data is used for public good. And so one of the very first things we did in the National Digital Twin Programme was offer up these Gemini principles for conversation to see if this kind of reflects what we want from our National Digital Twin. And it comes under the three headings of purpose, trust, and function. So right at the center of it is about the National Digital Twin must be trustworthy. If it's not trustworthy, then it won't work. And this is why it's not just a technical program, it's a socio-technical program. It's absolutely essential that this thing that we build is trustworthy. And I think that is to do with its openness and its security and its quality. So I won't run through what all of these principles are, but I think it might be interesting to come back to them in the conversation, because you can kind of see some tensions in there. Because what we're saying is that it must be as open as possible, but also it must be secure. You say, oh, that sounds like a tension. And now we're not saying where that balance point lies. We're just saying that they're both important. And the way we get to the right balance point is through conversation, through dialogue in the industry. But I think that the point for me here that's most important is that this journey needs to be guided by values, because there's no default that says that technical stuff works out well. We've got to put in effort to make it work out well. Okay, so now I'm on to the what are we doing kind of stuff. And I think in order to get that secure, resilient data sharing working, I've already suggested that it needs to have some standards related to the quality and consistency of data. And we're calling those standards the digital commons. It's something that we need to share in common. They need to be open to all. This is the whole thing about the low barrier to entry. And they need to be developed collaboratively. There needs to be consensus around that. But what those digital commons then do is create a huge digital twin market that I've already already touched on. And within that digital twin market, there will be people buying digital twins, people selling products and services for digital twins. There'll be lawyers helping with commercial arrangements. There'll be insurers. There'll be everything that you'd expect in a functioning market. And maybe that market needs a bit of regulation to correct any market failures. But basically what we're talking about here is creating a vibrant market which will then go and build the national digital twin. So I think that this is a game, the game changer type of thing. And really what we're talking about is collaborating on the rules so that we can compete on the game. A game's no fun with no rules. Try to play football with no rules. It doesn't work. Some people are picking up the ball, some people are kicking it. It doesn't work. But if we agree on the rules, then we can play almost an infinite number of games based on the same rule. And the delivery vehicle that we're using to do this, we've set up a digital twin hub. The digital twin hub is really focused on those players in the market. So the owner operators, and we see that very often the owner operators of physical assets will be the owners of digital twins. So these might be owner operators of infrastructure. They might be cities doing a similar thing in cities or local councils. So the owners of digital twins, but also the suppliers of products and services. Also, we're starting to see an academic community grow in the digital twin hub, and interest from lawyers and others who will have a part in the market that I talked about. So the digital twin hub really is a means of concentrating that community of people who are making waves in digital twins. And what we've said about the digital twin hub is it should learn by doing and progress by sharing. If everyone had to go away and develop their own digital twins their own way, learn all their own lessons, fall down all of their own holes, then you can see it will take a long time. If we bring them together and share the lessons, then we can get to the destination quicker. So that's what the digital twin hub is about. It's about practitioners learning by doing, progressing by sharing. And then we've got our digital commons, where we have some specialists who are helping us to develop those common rules that will hopefully benefit the whole game. The collaborate on the rules, compete on the game thing. And what we see there is that it's really important that those solutions that we're developing should be tested and validated by the practitioners. It wouldn't work if we were just to come up with some semantic solutions and just kind of impose it on the market. The market wouldn't like that, and it wouldn't work. So I think if we're going to recognize this as a socio-technical change program, how we go about it really matters. So we need somehow to enable that collaboration on the rules. But where that happens is in digital commons. And then we've got the third part of our vehicle, which is about the change program itself, the socio-technical change program. And this is because in the digital twin hub, we see the innovators and the early adopters. And the digital twin hub now has 777 members the last time I looked. So that's absolutely brilliant. And the DT hub is a vibrant, exciting community, but it's not everyone. And for us to unlock the full value of the national digital twin, it needs to spread far and wide. And so we need a means of engaging with a much broader community. That's the socio-technical change program. And another point to make on this is that if we were to come up with a perfect technical solution, but it wasn't adopted, it would be completely useless. So the adoption is equally important as the technical solution. In the DT hub, it's just about to go for a refresh on what it looks like and how you interact with it. So in some ways, what I've just shown there might be out of date in a few moments, but it really is an exciting community, and I'd commend it to any of you who are active in this area. Join up. Join the networks which are involved there, and the best thing really is to get stuck in. So rather than kind of go just as a consumer, There is some great stuff in there to consume, by the way, but it's even better if you get stuck in and contribute, because then it's much more like a community. And maybe that's an important thing for me to say, is that the DT Hub essentially is a community. The website is just an enabler of the community. Then in the Digital Commons, earlier this year, we published this report, The Pathway Towards the Information Management Framework. This was us suggesting what the way forward might be. And we've invited consultation on that. We invited people to come back to us to engage and say if it works or if it doesn't work for them. Essentially, what we're seeing is that there are three key parts to the Digital Commons. The foundation data model, which is all about enabling a consistent approach to data modeling. The reference data library, which is all about enabling us to have shared reference data. And basically, if you don't have those two things, data sharing becomes really difficult. If everyone has got their own data models which are completely incompatible, that increases friction. If everyone has their own version of reference data, that increases the friction. So addressing the foundation data model and the reference data library feel like essential things for us to do. And then the integration architecture is all about those protocols that I said earlier on the cross-section of the pipe diagram. And then very recently, we've published these documents, the Survey of Top-Level Ontologies and Survey of Reference Data Libraries. Now, those are deeply technical documents, but I would still commend them to you, because the team that has written them have written them in such a clever way. I can say this because I wasn't in the team, but they've done a really good job. That means that even though it's highly technical, it is accessible, and you can see the direction of thought. The Pathway Towards the Information Management Framework, likewise, is a very accessible document. So I would commend it to you. And then finally, on the change program, we've set up a number of different ways in which people can interface with the program. So one of the most important ones is that every Tuesday we have what we call a Gemini call, and that's inviting people in to see what we're up to. And it does change every week. There's new stuff happening, so it is worth coming every week. But if you don't want to come every week, you can come once a month, and you'll still get a window into what's happening. Because as I've explained before, we really need this to be open, and people need to see inside to see what's going on. And we've set up as well what we call Gemini supporters and Gemini ambassadors for individuals, supporters for organizations that want to come along and get involved in the journey and do something. So I'd commend all of that to you. And that probably concludes what I was saying. What I'm really hoping is that you can tell from that there is the potential here to change the game. I really think that this is a potential game changer, and the actuality of changing the game depends on us. It's up to us. We can do it, and I really hope that we do. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark. Absolutely brilliant presentation. We have got a few questions coming through. I think I'll as they continue to feed through, I'll just fire a few other thoughts at you. I think you've ticked an awful lot of these things off the list because you've already described the value of the digital twin to businesses in the sector. I'd mentioned earlier and was thinking about the idea that obviously there's other nations involved in trying to capture data and work with data. And I was on a call yesterday with some design team colleagues in the US and in Canada, and it seems like they could really use something like the Gemini principles, because if you look at Toronto, for example, and the Google Sidewalk Labs project, that hit challenge and barrier after barrier due to a lack of transparency and clarity around the way data was used, around its ethical use. And so my first question to you is, give us a bit more insight into that sort of ethics and privacy and how that might be seen. And the second question is much more on the sort of public level about, I know that we've got shared views on this, but we have to engage the public in the development and the use of this. So has there been any thought as to how the public will engage with digital twins and learn to love them as opposed to learn to fear them, I suppose?
Yeah, this is a fantastic area, isn't it? I think we could probably use up a whole whole hour just chatting around this, because I think you've touched on a lot of really important areas there. I think fundamentally for me, it's important that the national digital twin should be trusted. I kind of touched on that at the heart of the Gemini principles, because if it isn't, even if it's there to do people good, if they don't trust it, they will come and tear it down, and I would say rightly so. Because it must be trusted, and therefore we have to put the effort in to helping people to trust it. And I think a lot of that is to do with the openness and the security and the quality, there's a lot written, isn't there, about the trade-offs that people have to have when they kind of sign away all their data in order to get benefits. And I'm not convinced about that. I'm not convinced that there even needs to be a trade-off. I think that this can be just really driven on benefits and outcomes. And part of that is making a clear distinction between systems data and personal data. So an awful lot, almost most of what I was talking about and the benefits that we're talking about getting from the National Digital Twin is working with systems data. It's data about our assets and processes and systems in the built environment. It's got nothing to do with personal data.
I think your description of the system of systems was really interesting, and actually what really grabbed me was the idea that service to the community was at the heart of that. I mean, is the National Digital Twin something that you can see being of service to the wider community? And by that I mean that we will freely give away as much data as we possibly could ever fancy on our mobile phones, because they offer such high levels of convenience, and we almost give away that trust because we're receiving such conveniences from the service. So can you imagine a future where the digital twin is being used by the everyday public?
Very much so. Yeah, I'd really hope so. And on that diagram that I showed about the processes across the built environment, and I kind of put use at the center of it. And I think it's quite notable that within the industry, when you look at the kind of delivery processes, they more often than not start with planning and kind of end with commissioning, and there's very little in there about the actual use. But I think that if we're taking this outcomes focused, systems based view, then what we see is that it's all about use. People are the beginning and the end of the process. It's satisfying their needs that kind of drives it in the first place. So yes, I think that there are all sorts of ways in which the use of the built environment can be improved by the National Digital Twin. So it's a long way around saying yes.
And again, just to jump on something you mentioned there around the outcomes focused, it would appear that there's a lot of government agendas at the moment moving in the direction of value-based decision making. We've spoken in the past about the Digital Twin program aligning with the value toolkit that's forthcoming in the construction sector. And again, fantastically ambitious, great ethos that all decisions will be value focused and value based. But my hope potentially for the digital twin is that it will make that value based decision making, the process of that, more accountable in the construction sector. We're almost engaging in as you say, in a whole new game whereby there'll be a system out there, a digital infrastructure that will check whether we're doing what we say we are doing as architects, designers, construction companies, because the data will be so accessible, it will be open.
Again, I agree, and I think that there is a kind of a high level view of value that can define it in terms of outcomes per pound. That's what we're really after, and those outcomes being economic, social, environmental outcomes, and we're wanting to maximize that. But I think that you're right to kind of point back into those decisions, because I think that's kind of where we unlock the value. In many ways, information is like the carrier of value. And if we need to have that information in an unbroken golden thread all the way through our processes. And if it's broken, we lose value. So information is like the carrier of value. but where it gets released, the point of release is at making a better decision. So that sounds also theoretical. Where it kind of matters is that we do actually make better decisions, because it would be imaginable that we put all of this stuff in place, we serve up much better information to enable people to make better decisions, but they ignore it and they make decisions the same way they always did, in which case it's kind of useless. But part of that then means kind of comes around to exactly what you said, that people need to kind of be accountable for the decisions they make. And if they're making decisions not using the information, then that sounds like something somebody should be asked about.
Absolutely. And I mean, so globally, there's not, I can only think of New Zealand, who are really pushing government policy in a direction of value-based decision making. This would appear like an absolute game changer. Forgive the pun on Game Changers Live, but an absolute game changer with regards to there's no other government that I'm aware of that is attempting to put value and value-based decision making that isn't a traditional view of value. It's not about cost reduction. It's about real value to the environment, to society, at the heart of, one of its key sectors, its keystone sectors of the country in construction, but also at the heart of all decision making and processes of accountability, going forward with regards to its digital infrastructure and its construction sector. I think it's wildly ambitious. I mean, it's absolutely all credit.
I agree, but it's not just coming from one direction, is it? Which is really good, because I think that you've picked this up from the stuff that we're trying to do on the National Digital Twin Programme, but kind of like you indicate that there's other angles. And so, for example, the work of Project 13 has for quite a few years now been banging that value drum. And then also the work of CIH with the Value Toolkit. What has recently come out with the National Infrastructure Strategy, what I anticipate might come out with the Construction Playbook. There's an awful lot that is kind of pointing in this same direction. So it feels like we're kind of edging in that direction.
Yeah, it's. I mean, for me, it's one of the most globally. It's one of the most cohesive responses to increasing social pressures, the increasing environmental climate emergency, and then in our country, in the UK, disasters and tragedies like the Grenfell Tower fire and the focus on building safety. All of these things seem to have coalesced to put us at a really exciting position, really an opportunity where our response, I think, to date is, should be really given credit, because we've responded incredibly quickly and incredibly well to how we start to manage data, how we start to ensure continuous improvement. And for me, you can only really build continuous improvement if you're going to baseline and benchmark in some way. And that's the value of exactly what you're describing.
I think you're exactly right, and I kind of want to bottle what you're saying, because I think you're saying it in really good words. Maybe what we need is to have you in the National Digital Twin Programme doing the presentations, actually.
I've got some, Mark. Sorry, I'll let you finish your point there.
Yeah, I was just going to say that all of this is genuinely exciting, like you say. But there's a but, and the but is that underneath it, we've got to do some really hard housework, because at the moment, we've got to be honest with ourselves. Our data isn't in a fit state to do all of this lovely stuff. And it does mean that at that ground level, we've got to do some serious hard work to get it into a shape where we can do all of this stuff. The promise is massive, and it feels like it's actually doable, but there's still some real hard work to do to get there. And we shouldn't underestimate the grunt that is needed.
Yeah, and there's a big education piece, like you say, that sort of runs across that. I'll dive into some questions now, because we've got quite a few interesting questions coming through. We don't have to. There's quite a few of them, so we don't have to dwell in particular length on them, but obviously give them the time that you feel is needed. I think very quickly we've got a bit of a conversation going on in the questions panel around, is this not just BIM Plus, and should we not just call it something simpler rather than calling it a National Digital Twin? Should we just call it BIM Plus?
Oh, good question. So I think it absolutely does follow on from the brilliant work that we've already done in BIM. I think BIM is kind of an essential foundation for all of this thinking. We couldn't even imagine what we're talking about now if we hadn't done the foundational work in BIM, because what that has established is the importance of information management, and the industry kind of, it wasn't there even a few years ago. So BIM is utterly essential, and I kind of see it as a continuum. So we're not talking about something different, and we're definitely not saying, oh, now there's something new and shiny in town, forget about BIM. It's totally not that. This is building. I think when it comes to the name, a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. Doesn't matter what you call it. You could call it Bob if you want to. It's still the same thing. And what we're talking about on the information management, the information value chain kind of being wrapped around digital twins, the idea of connecting digital twins, secure, resilient data sharing, that is a build. That's not the same. It's a build on an essential foundation, but it's something more. Yeah. So I think in many ways, call it what you will, it's still the same thing and it's still valuable.
I suppose in the past, I've very publicly questioned the sort of BIM mandates and the way that's gone through, just with a view that if we try to raise the bar, sometimes that bar is seen not as a mandate; it's seen as an aspiration when a bar is put in that place. But I think that's more about culture and behaviour in our industry. And actually, what the BIM mandate has really done is teach us the basics. As you say, the foundation of this. I think there's an opportunity with the progression into the discussion around the national digital twin to really start showing some exemplars around innovation and how it's being used within the industry. I'll dive onto another question. We've got David Elliott, who has put forward a question around how applicable is this to sort of retrofit and improvement. Obviously, a lot of that building stock already exists. I mean, in some cases, I would imagine that data infrastructure actually already exists in thousands of places around the country.
Exactly, that's precisely it. I think you pretty much answered the question there. So yes, it's totally applicable to retrofit, partly because of the amount of data that already exists, but also because the cost of capture of new data is dropping through the floor. Whether that's from sensors in existing buildings, or even kind of capturing geometric data of existing buildings, it's something that is becoming very accessible now. So it's a good question, but the answer is it's utterly applicable to retrofit.
And I think to pick up on your point there on the cost reductions, we're absolutely seeing that. I mean, I think there was a statistic the other day that in 2018, the global sensor market was around 150 billion. And by 2024, it's expected to be around 354 billion. So we're looking at incredible exponential growth and acceleration in the ability to capture data. Let's just dive onto another question here. Nick Dutton spoke very concisely in the questions around digital twins sort of already existing in other areas, in other industries. So engineering design and or computer modeling in other areas such as healthcare. Are we just reinventing this for construction, or is what you're proposing here bigger than that?
So yeah, Nick is exactly right. Digital twins are not new to humanity. They feel like they're new to the built environment, but really what we're doing is just applying existing thinking. So it's not reinventing it. It's not inventing something for ourselves that we don't want to listen to from someone else. It's actually porting across all those lessons, and so we see some of the most advanced thinking in digital twins in advanced manufacturing. And one of the best examples, interestingly, and I think it's a very accessible example, is in Formula One, which it would be nice to talk through how the Formula One digital twins get used. But it's really interesting to me that you can kind of talk that through and then think, oh yeah, this can apply to trains, can't it? If it applies to a Formula One car, it can apply to a train, can't it? And actually, a lot of the lessons are directly applicable in our sector. So Nick is right to raise that, but like I say, it's not reinvention, it's more application.
Yeah, brilliant. David Elliott, is this presentation going to be shared? Absolutely, David. It's streaming live now on YouTube, so we'll be able to get recordings following that. Seema has asked, are there possible applications to this in terms of waste management across cities? And I suppose I would add on to that, is there another trick to be had there around trying to reinforce the circular economy through looking at waste management and digital infrastructure in cities?
Yeah, totally so. In fact, I was looking at some slides that had come from the Dame Ellen MacArthur Foundation on exactly this just yesterday. So yes, I think that waste is really interesting in economic infrastructure, because in some ways it feels like it's the poor relation at the moment, when you compare it against transport, energy, water, but I think it's kind of just the beginning, because at the moment it looks very linear, doesn't it? We kind of collect stuff that we call waste and then we take it away and we put it in a hole somewhere. Whereas actually, as soon as we start seeing that waste as a resource and we start to see multiple life cycles of resources, then this whole idea of digital twins and being able to track things, make better decisions, I think becomes completely applicable. So yes, it's totally applicable to waste. I think there's a long journey to go on that, and it can help to facilitate the circular economy, because I would also kind of indicate how that circular economy thinking is a systemic issue, because you can have resources popping up and being used in one sector and then being reused or applied in a different way in another sector, because the resource can have multiple life cycles. And so I think managing resources through multiple life cycles is exactly the kind of thing that a digital twin can help with. And so I would kind of look forward to seeing digital twins being used more and more, and in ways which are more exciting in the waste sector. At the moment, it's probably a bit limited.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I think we're already, as an example, we're already starting to see the cost of waste resources rise through some really innovative material startups who are using waste glass and waste plastic in construction. And we're seeing the price per ton of waste glass and waste plastic already accelerate. So I think what you said there is absolutely spot on. The really interesting question from Craig around how are you engaging local authorities, and how have they responded to the idea of the national digital twin? I suppose because many of us will see local authorities as either the barriers or the enablers to engaging with a lot of this.
Yeah, so we've got a number of local authorities as members of the DT Hub already. I mentioned that our perception is that at the moment the DT Hub is populated by innovators and early adopters. So what I'm guessing is that what we're seeing in the DT Hub from the point of view of local authorities are the ones that are kind of most forward thinking. But it's really good to have the local authorities there. They're getting involved. I said earlier on, it's really good to have people in the DT Hub who are getting stuck in. That is our experience with the local authorities that we've got at the moment. And what I hope that means is that it actually creates some momentum and some reason why other local authorities might want to join. It's because there's something of value that is relevant to them. So yes, they are involved, and it's feeling pretty relevant in a local authority context. Absolutely.
Well, Mark, we're coming towards the end, or we've come towards the end of our session together. I must say thank you very much. It was incredibly inspiring and very enlightening as well. We've had some great comments and interaction from the audience. If anybody else wants to continue this conversation around some of these points, feel free to connect with myself or Mark on LinkedIn. It's probably the best place to start. And thank you all for attending. Thanks again, Mark. And hopefully everybody enjoys the rest of their day.
Yeah, and thanks. You're a great host.
Cheers, Mark. Okay, thanks everybody, and enjoy the rest of Game Changers Live.